Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. The India-China angle gets interesting day by day. I know I cover it a lot on this channel, but it needs to be covered because that is the biggest geopolitical relation, equation, or dynamics in this part of the world, if I may. To discuss that, who better than Mr. Jayadeva Ranade, who I think the Chinese would consider as a China expert. So thank you, sir, for joining me. Sorry for that pun, but it's getting really interesting when we study about China. So just an opening comment of how do you see this development in China? You've been watching China for years now. Have you seen China going through stuff like what is going through today in terms of its balance, its economy, its politics, ever before, sir?
Thank you, Ari, for having me on the show. And if I may say, also for focusing on a very important and potentially, shall I say, disruptive rival as far as India is concerned. I think more and more people need to look at it and should have started much earlier. But anyhow, better late than never. Uh, to come to the point that you made about the relationship, you're absolutely right that for India, the relationship with China, we have always said it is important, but now I would say it is a crucial relationship. And it is crucial for both. I don't, as you would have gathered even from our previous interviews, I don't like to take a defeatist approach to things. And therefore, I don't agree that, with the saying that, we have to be watchful of what China is doing. I would say both. China is also on a trajectory where it's trying to build its economy, where it's trying to rival the United States, which is incidentally a very, very powerful country, regardless of what people may say. So powerful, in fact, that in my view, that even if it is in decline, it'll take a very long time for the decline to become apparent and to have an effect. But as I said, China is trying to get there, and so are we trying to build our economy. And if things go sour, the economies of both will be damaged, and the upward climb or the upward trajectory will be affected. By how much one can't say, but it will be. For the simple reason that India is not about to acquiesce to whatever China does. Today, things are different. We are also, if I may use the term, battle ready. Our forces are deployed, so are the Chinese. And I think more importantly, the political will is not to yield ground or concessions to the Chinese. So I think that does make for a very crucial relationship between the two of us. I think Xi Jinping made a strategic miscalculation in April 2020 by trying what he did, uh, coming in such a large size with forces drawn from other military regions was not something just for a minor intrusion or some little show of force on the LAC. Obviously, there was a larger agenda at play. But having said that, I think he is now stuck as to how to pull back. But at the same time, I don't see him showing any signs of wanting to pull back. So this situation is going to remain for a while. But superimposed on this, I would also invite your attention to the China-US relationship, which would come into play. That is a separate contention that is going on. Both sides are making, of course, are posturing and playing tough with each other. Um, I think the Chinese got it right when they said that all the visits by senior US officials to China, so called to build guardrails around the relationship, is only so much posturing, whereas the US is actually doesn't have very or has hostile designs towards China. Be that as it may, I would say that these two are the concerns for the Chinese leadership today. There are, of course, other larger things at play, but these are the two that are, causing them problems. As far as we are concerned, of course, there is a problem. We are trying to, ease tensions and sort things out peacefully. And I hope it works. But frankly, I don't see any signs. So I think we are in for a period of tension.
Indeed, sir. With the Chinese position, if I guess if they were growing and as at the rate of 5-8%, whatever they wanted to, and they were achieving what they wanted to, probably they could have looked away and pulled back. But with a weakening China, sir, and that's interesting because when you look at it as a politic and as an economy, both are on decline. You recently had the state council pretty much coming out and telling or pushing back on one of Xi Jinping's orders with regards to private entities. They've put out a request to come back and the industries to come back and report to them about bad behaviors in quotes. How does that seem to you as a politic structure within China, considering what's happening to their economies? Is there some sort of a pushback building against Xi Jinping?
I'm glad you brought this up. In fact, I was going to touch on this had you not asked the question. So I'm glad you have. Let me briefly say that we are seeing a change in policy. The first is in the political sphere, where the principle of decision by consensus has been done away with virtually in de facto terms. It is now Xi Jinping, what he says will go. And if you read the Chinese media, Chinese newspapers, Chinese central television, etc., they all, are peppered with references, to Xi Jinping, very laudable references to Xi Jinping, things like this. But if we look at the Politburo Standing Committee, Politburo, they're loaded with his people. The Politburo Standing Committee are all people who are either his loyalists or people who don't have the spine to oppose him. There are two such characters there. The Politburo itself has, again, an overwhelming majority of Xi Jinping people in it. So he has captured them. But at the same time, before anyone goes away with the idea that therefore Xi Jinping is fully in charge, let me say something which would reinforce your comment about decline. Uh, Decline is a wider term, so I won't go into that, but I will point to two things. One is the disappearance of Qing Kang, the Chinese foreign minister. Now, here I'd just like to point out to you and to the viewers that he disappeared from public view on the 25th of June. It was on the 25th of July, exactly a month later, that the National People's Congress Standing Committee met and decided that he goes, that he will be divested of his position as foreign minister. So that's 1 month. But they did not divest him of his more senior position of state councillor, which is a level above a minister and below a vice premier. There are various theories going around that they will do it only when he is convicted and all that. That has not been the case in other cases. So they could have done it. They are empowered to do it, but they didn't. So that's one point I'd like to make, that those 30 days between the 25th of June and 25th of July, to my view, in my assessment, has been marked by tough behind-the-scenes negotiations and push and pull between the factions in the Chinese Communist Party. Factions, obviously, that are pushing back against Xi Jinping. Here, let me clarify why Qing Kang. Qing Kang is in public view. He's on the stage almost every day as foreign minister. He is, or he was, he is Xi Jinping man. He has spent most of his time in the intelligence services of the party. He was brought by Xi Jinping into the foreign ministry. Then he was, shall I say, helicoptered, or he superseded a lot of others for the appointment as ambassador to Washington, which is a very prestigious appointment. Before he finished his term, I think under 2 years, he was called back. Again, he superseded a whole lot of others and became foreign minister. Now, this would have upset a couple of guys. Not only was he made foreign minister, he was also made state councillor. The first being Wang Yi, who was his predecessor. who had to wait 5 years before getting the title of state councillor, and who, by seeing Qing Kang's appointment as foreign minister, in essence, saw his power being reduced. His power means power to meddle in foreign affairs, etc. So that is one. Second, he would have had his own people in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in China who would have been, not well disposed towards Qin Kang. And we saw that when, as soon as Qin Kang was removed as foreign minister, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs official website deleted all references to him as foreign minister within a day. But last weekend, the same official website restored all those. So, to my mind, it means that there is a push and pull going on, and Xi Jinping hasn't either decided to abandon him, or there is this, he's opposing those who want Chen Kang out. So this is how I look at it. In any case, it's not a routine matter of just being found corrupt, etc. So that is one thing I would point to when you're talking about weakening. The second is the growing dissatisfaction in China for a number of reasons. Firstly, the economy is slowing down. Secondly, the unemployment of graduate unemployment, which is now soared to 23%. And here, it has also triggered a social phenomena, which you will understand, called Thangping or Runshe. Now, Thangping is, like giving up hope. The guy says, let me lie on the couch in my sister's house or in my mother's house. I'm fed, I'm looked after. Why should I bother to work? It's a loss of spirit. And same thing, the other thing is let it rot. So even the Chinese Communist Party officials have expressed concern in this, because this is very wide ramification. That means your educated youth are saying, forget it, there's no point in working, because I'm not going to get the kind of job I'm qualified for. I'm not going to get a job which pays me adequate. So why work? And that's going to impact productivity in China. So this is a second factor when you talk of decline. This is it. It's not just figures, but this is also the case. The third is the dissatisfaction among the cadres. Their salaries, their bonuses have been removed, their salaries have been reduced, and the provincial governments do not have enough funds because the center has prohibited them from selling land, which is where they got their money from. So I'm just mentioning these three. I know I'm taking up your time, but just these three which are issues that are there, and there are many more, but these are there. Bothering Xi Jinping also and causing dissatisfaction also is the state of China-US relations. The cadres of the Communist Party are very unhappy with that, and they have been blaming Xi Jinping, in fact, since the 19th Party Congress, for not having managed this relationship well and for having challenged the US. When he said that we will become a global power with pioneering influence, etc. So, and they're very, very apprehensive that a day will come when the US imposes sanctions on them and they will be really hurt personally as well as a nation. So these are big things that are going to that affect them. As far as the military is concerned, I think Xi Jinping has been focused on the military from the time he got in on basically two things. One, ensuring the obedience of the PLA to the party. So he has enlarged, shall I say, enhanced the powers of the political commissars, etc. And secondly, he has been trying to gear the army up to become a real fighting machine. So, new weaponry has been brought in. They've been asked to have realistic exercises, simulation exercises have increased, things like this. But the bottom line is still that they haven't fought a real war. And, there are still cases of corruption at the higher levels, etc. Now, as you rightly pointed out, he has thrown out over 145 generals by 2017, sorry. More would have gone later. And, but, obviously a man, when he joins the PLA, he wants to rise. And the benefits for a person who makes it to Major General are huge. The difference between a senior colonel and a major general a lot. So they're all striving for that and running the risk of being caught for corruption or whatever. And the suicide cases that you come across are suicide by the officers, because if they don't commit suicide, their family gets nothing if they are convicted of corruption. So they thought, they think that this is a better way out. But these are problems in the PLA. Apart from this, the restrictions of the PLA have become very, very stringent. For example, when they go on inspection, they are asked to live with the men, they are asked to eat in the mess, etc., even generals. And the PLA has been, a fiat has been issued saying that you cannot drink in army camps. And if you want to drink alcohol, I mean, you will drink on Sunday at your home. So they're not very happy with that at all. So there are a lot of, shall I say, areas of discontent, or pools of discontent in Chinese society. And these are factors that Xi Jinping has to contend with. We are not seeing them in the Chinese media popping up every day, but you see little signs, including, if I'll just mention two. One is where they talk about, the two maintenances. There are these two things that have been brought in, two safeguards and two maintenances, meaning actually loyalty to Xi Jinping. And that has now been brought in as a charge against officers and defined as betrayal of the party leadership. So, and that's in quotes. So, obviously, that's a worry that he has brought in, that he has taken steps to tackle. And the second are the various programs, the ideological indoctrination programs, etc., that have been mounted. There's one almost every year they have some kind of program or the other, and now they have started something else. So there is this going on, what they call theme education. So what I'm trying to say is that Xi Jinping himself, while his position may to all of us look secure, it's not really all that secure. And I just look at the security apparatus that he's built around him. And that brings me to my final point, which links with yours, that when autocrat, or if you want to say dictator or autocrat, I'd prefer that, autocrat, that when he feels shaky, he could be inclined to undertaking some kind of an adventure. And that makes it a risk for the countries around him. We are all talking of Taiwan, but we also have a live situation on our own border. So I think, he has an option or two options before him. And he may be tempted to do something because he's hyped nationalism to a huge extent inside China. And, this is one way he will look at trying to restore his position and tell the Chinese people that I am the first Chinese leader to have begun the process of reunification of China. I'll end there.
It's interesting that a perception would kind of keep him in power. So, just a short comment to add on to what you said. Would you consider him a lonely leader? So that's something that I've came up to a conclusion, because when you look back into history, Hitler, Stalin, when they came to this power point, they were lonely. I mean, Stalin's death is one of the biggest examples of loneliness as a leader. How would you term his position, sir?
That's true. I would say that he's probably lonely in certain respects, but he has some old cronies around him, some drinking buddies, etc., still around, uh,
Yeah.
who of course have risen to the top. He's built them, brought them up, and so he has some people with whom he probably shares thoughts. I don't know. He would be sharing it with someone. He's very close to his wife also, and people who've been close to her have found a berth in the recent party congress in the Politburo. So, that kind of situation there. So I don't think he's totally, I mean, entirely lonely, but he's quite lonely. And there have been reports for some years now that he's insecure. He shifts his, the bedroom, etc. And also that he has put Politburo Standing Committee and Politburo members under surveillance. In fact, the Public Security Minister is the one who's recommended that, Wang Xiaohong, and he reports directly to him. So that is that does indicate shall I say, a high degree of nervousness.
So the interesting thing which is coming out of China today are more and more dissent videos, which, I mean, to my little memory of watching China, is not very common. We rarely, once in 6 months, saw a small little gathering or a protest or something like that. Today, it's, I mean, when I see it on Twitter and stuff, and these are date stamped from in Mandarin itself, and you wonder what's the game. Either there's somebody circulating these videos again and again, which doesn't make any sense because it won't impact, but because the videos are connected to realistic incidents and realistic news items that actually come out of China. How do you see the people reacting to this whole slowdown, tightening of rules? I mean, there's a concept of 15-minute cities. Every 15 minutes, your face gets scanned. How do you think the people are kind of taking this forward, sir?
They're not happy, particularly the educated are not happy at all. The academia is not happy. Students are unhappy because they know that they are under watch and they don't like it, particularly this facial recognition that is coming. And as far as the videos are concerned, which you referred to, I would say that we need to accept them with a bit of caution because a lot of effort at discrediting the regime and Xi Jinping going on from abroad also and via the internet. The second is that there are incidents taking place, but when you and I see the video, we are not able to really figure out how large the
Connect. Hmm.
incident
Hmm.
was. So even a couple of people they do put it out, but where there are problems, like in the floods recently, there have been a couple of cases reported where people are very unhappy and they've said, you guys want to look after yourself and keep yourself safe in Chungnanai, which is the residence of the leadership while we, get swamped and our houses are sort of flooded, etc. So there is that feeling. And to support that, I'd say that the official media in China, all the newspapers have emblazoned on the front page, right on top, how Xi Jinping, the great commander, has been leading the fight against the floods and things like that. So it's obviously the leadership is also aware of this. So that's what I'd like to say on the videos, but certainly they are there.
I kind of go by the rule that if China is mentioning something in a certain particular angle, one needs to ask why now, and what is happened that he has to say, or whoever it is has to say this. Uh, I consider that as a thumb rule. So, would you agree with me? Because whatever you see, I mean, Xi Jinping's, you mentioned about Xi Jinping wanting to ensure that the army protects the CPC. Uh, his recent visit, there was a dialogue which came out, you have to follow my command. Now that's very interesting. I mean, no general of the army or any army chief will say, boss, you have to follow my command. That's understood. So how do you kind of term all this?
Yeah, not only that. In fact, today People's Daily has a very interesting and lengthy article on the same theme. I haven't, gone through the entire thing, so I don't know whether they've used that phrase, but I shall revert to you if I find it. But certainly, there are a number of articles, including this one, which emphasize parties' quote unquote absolute obedience to the party. I mean, the PLA's absolute obedience. Now, why keep saying it? If it's already there, it should be fine. But they do keep saying it, and they reinforce that with education campaigns in the PLA. So obviously there is a problem there. And one thing we have picked up is that they feel that this problem is more acute or exists, is more in existence among the educated lot who are joining the PLA. And if you recall, the PLA's emphasis is to pick up, educated people
Yeah.
rather than rustic youth. So obviously, this is one problem that they do have. This is there. The second is, I think, with the passage of time, the old revolutionaries have left the scene. So all the party bosses now are party apparatchiks who come up. They have not served in the army. There are very few or in the security services. So they have themselves their own, they have to figure out their own dynamics of how to deal with the PLA and with the PLA officers. And here there's an interesting point that I'd like to make. I don't have too much detail on it, but a couple of years ago, I mean, Xi Jinping, for some reason, issued an order saying that the PLA officers who were appointed to the provincial party committees, usually on the standing committee, will no longer be appointed and they'll be withdrawn. And the clarification given was that they are needed, for the army to harness its own resources, etc., etc. And then within a year, we began finding, without any announcement, and I underline that, without any announcement, uh, PLA officers again being appointed back to the provincial party committee. Now, and then, some of them said, well, this is for better coordination, etc. So obviously, uh, you know, uh, they felt a gap where by removing them and that there was no coordination. So they run it. So there are indicators like this, I think, which, as you rightly said, what he said, probably what he says means something more or something else. It is certainly about party leadership in the PLA. To my mind, it does seem that there is either they haven't accepted it fully or there are some problems, which is why he keeps doing it.
The recent removal of these admirals from the strategic support force and the rocket forces, one of them was a political commissar, sir. I can understand a regular army general being removed. Fair enough, he didn't listen to this thing. But when a political commissar gets taken out, I tried searching for it. It's not very often that that has happened. Probably handful of times in history. That is a very targeted move, sir. Is that something to do with inability to control this particular force?
No, I think there have been cases of political commissars also being removed. Um, and corruption is something, since the political commissar is also there, hand in glove and tandem with the commander. Maybe they're sharing the spoils, I don't know, or whatever. But I don't have a fix on what's happened with the rocket force. Not too much has come out. But two things I do feel. One is that we'll have to wait till some more information trickles out. But I think it's either that they haven't been functioning properly or corruption. One of the two. I don't buy this theory about uh, you know the leakage to a foreign intelligence agency, etc. I don't buy that. The second is that the force itself, the rocket force itself, I think its efficiency or its potency has not been damaged because when you remove the top, your backbone remains intact. I mean, let's say if we pick up a division or a corps here, you remove the top for whatever reason, two or three. The rest is still there. You got your brigadiers, your colonels, etc., and the army as an entity will continue to function. So I don't think the rocket force morale would have been affected, but its efficiency would not have been affected. The third point could be, they're talking about deploying, or there is a move to deploy the rocket force entities under the theater commander.
Correct.
So whether there has been a policy level resistance to that by these guys, I don't know. But if you go back to the time of the reorganization of the restructuring and reorganization of the PLA 2015, 2016, at that time, Xi Jinping had to go around the country and speak. I think it was about 800 units that he went to around the country, trying to convince them about the importance. And he spoke to a lot of senior officers. And that is the time he began actually, he brought the PLA within the net of the party's anti corruption outfit and began throwing out a whole lot of them. I think that would have worked to facilitate introduction of the reforms. So that is another possibility that I'm throwing up.
I mean, let's come to some external geopolitics now. So the Chinese seem to be having issues with. Okay, they have issues with everyone, but there was a delicate balance that was maintained between China and USA, where acrimony and tensions would be raised up by either party, and that they would calm down, and both of them would give kind of reconciliatory comments. The recent visit of Janet Yellen. Uh, there are two versions of it. One, she gave them the riot act and told them that you want to sell our bonds, fair enough. Kiss your generals and your own personal black money, which is stored in USA, goodbye. And then Kissinger was sent to kind of calm things down. It's okay, I'll talk. The second version is that she was that very polite, bending down sort of a thing. How do you see this balance between both the countries? Is USA kind of just telling China to hang on, let me deal with Russia, I'll come back to you, in a very strong sense?
I think, you know, Xi Jinping's mistake was when he first took over in 2012 at the 18th Party Congress, when he said, the great rejuvenation of China, etc., and where he wants China to be.
Hmm.
And then at the next party Congress, 19th party, I mean, at that time also he said, he wants China to become a major power. But at the 19th party Congress, he said he wants it to become a global or a major power with global pioneering influence by 2049. Now, translated, that means that he wants China to have the ability to create or to influence international organizations. Now, that capacity only the US has. So it was a direct challenge. And meanwhile, he also spoke about becoming one of the world's advanced leading powers in technology and building up the army into a world-class army. By at that time, they had said 2027. Now now they're saying 2027. Earlier to 2049. And the Americans read that, and I think correctly, as an open challenge to the United States of America that
Hmm.
China wants to be number one. Now, this didn't happen, just like that. Earlier, if you recall, Xi Jinping's predecessor, Hu Jintao, used to talk about a new type of big power relations. He had mentioned that to the Americans. He had, said that here and there, and was going to raise it when he was traveling to the US on, I think, his last or second last visit, meeting with Bush. When he got signals that he better not raise it because we are not going to accept it. So he dropped it. But at that time, also, what they were talking about is you and I can partner and share the world's problems. You handle this half, we'll handle this half. In fact, an explicit offer was made. So Xi Jinping has carried it forward, except that he is not talking about sharing. He is talking about China being number one.
Hmm.
Now, and that is where Trump reacted. So if you notice, uh, November 2017 was this declaration by him. And mind you, at that time, some cadres whom I met, Chinese cadres whom I met, told me that Xi Jinping has made a mistake. In fact, one of them used the word blunder, said China is not ready, and he has, overstretched himself. He doesn't understand. We are going to be left friendless, etc., etc. Criticism had started. Now, you look at the US, it's number one. They are not going to, and they've been, I think, number one for around almost
Yeah.
200 years, 100 odd years. So they are not going to be willing to accept a Chinese sitting and telling them what to do and what not to do. And all this talk, that's why I referred to this US decline. It's going to take a long, long time if the decline is there. But I was in the US recently, just got back about 10 days ago. And out there, what I gathered from people I met in their government, a very clear message that we are going to take on China, and there's no question of China becoming, competing. I mean, not competing, but of our yielding our number one position. So, which means, I mean, I suppose that push comes to shove, they are going to, wrap China on the knuckles. And I think, frankly, if you ask me to speculate a bit, I think there is a shrinking window for the United States to put China in its place if they're intending to do so, before it becomes too powerful for the US to deal with them, or for Xi Jinping, because he also has a short window. If what I told you about the dissatisfaction, etc., rising, if that does increase beyond a point, then Xi Jinping's position itself is under threat. So he
Right.
would have to do something. So we can call them, if we are trying the Chinese style of saying two shrinkings that we are all facing.
The factor is that the Chinese, to my mind, sir, they want to deal with the USA because they kind of feel that dealing with anyone else will reduce their position in the world. They need to kind of just talk to the big boy. And that's very interesting to me because if whatever little reading I do, so when we read their think tanks, there's hardly, I mean, if you see one article about USA, there is very few articles about anywhere else, and the number two country that gets featured in their thought processes is in India. Modi this, Modi that, quad this, quad that. It's quite a regular affair. Have they started? And I believe so. So kindly please help me and understand this better. So I believe that the Chinese never look at us from a bilateral angle. It's always through a global, regional power balance with the USA, uh, sort of an angle right now. How do you see this span opening out? Because India is not a country that is in decline; it's also climbing. So, there have they kind of realized internally in any of their writings that, okay, here's a mistake that we need to sort out.
I think earlier they did not take India very seriously. I mean, right, many years earlier, yes, that we are a cultural power which probably has been superior or at least on par with China, etc. They had that feeling that, in terms of spirituality, religion, culture, we were very advanced. Uh, then, after independence, also for a few years, if you read their media, there was always a comparison. Where is India? Where is China? Why is India getting this and why not in China not? All that kind of stuff. But by the 80s, they had come to the conclusion that we don't count for anything. And, they had started sort of looking, if I may say, looking down at us, derogatory pieces, all that kind of thing. Um, and later, I would say, and I'm quoting now a article by the Chinese Institutes of Contemporary International Relations, which, as you know, is linked with the Ministry of State Security. You referred to it earlier, uh, saying that India's rise has started since 2014. And basically, what they said also, India has started becoming a problem since 2014 because, it is wanted to get into NSG, wanted to get into the UNSC, etc., etc. So we became an irritant or a troublemaker as far as China is concerned in their scheme of things. Because Asia, as far as they're concerned, was only for them. Who are these guys who are trying to now push their way up, that kind of, and who are growing? So that was how I think things changed. I won't say that they look at India as a threat, but certainly as a concern at the senior levels. Some of their, people who write and all, of course, they maybe exaggerate it or they say we are doing this, that, but that's how I look at it. As far as the US is concerned, it's a major power. They also know it's a very big power. But I think they have overreached themselves by thinking that they can challenge the United States. They're not yet ready. And even Taiwan, I mean, if they were that powerful, uh, why do they have to hesitate so much? Why do they have to keep watching Washington to see what its intentions are? So I think uh, they're still far from where they want to be, but they are talking about it. They're making the right noises, but they have pushed the envelope far too much as far as the US is concerned. And let me just mention one more thing of late. What I noticed in a couple of PLA maintained websites in China, in Chinese, was talk about when the US strikes them from the east, we will strike them from the west.
Yes, sir.
Now, that indicates that they are worried that we guys may, or they are concerned that we are not just someone on the horizon.
The that's interesting because I read a phrase which was written in War on the Rocks by a Chinese blogger, and he said a credible second front. So that's very interesting to me because they don't give credit to anyone. So that's something which is
That reinforces the point I made that they're worried.
So the last section of my talk with you is about the Modi Z dynamic. Uh, we see a power play between both these leaders. Somewhere down the line, it's I won't call it a personal kind of fight, but it's still getting a little personal, without the personal allegations and the gali galoch and all that stuff. But it's still getting personal. We saw that in the SEO, where I think he's a bit worried that if he doesn't go and he doesn't kind of showcase himself, Modi Saab will kind of steal his thunder. We saw the same kind of a thing. I don't know if we played a prank with them by telling Reuters of all the things that no, Modi's going, not going. And the same news came out of China. Then suddenly, when news comes out that Modi Saab is going, and then the same news comes out from China. So that tells you that they're watching what Modi is doing very carefully, and they don't want Xi Jinping to look bad in front of, especially in front of Modi. Uh, how do you see this dynamic? Because both are strong leaders, both are nationalists, and I'm giving a bit too much credit to Xi Jinping sometimes, but both are looking for a certain level of acceptance in the world. Methods might be different, but that's the common goal. So, how do you see the dynamic between both these leaders, sir?
In addition to strong and nationalist, I'll also add the adjective bold. Both are bold. Both
Yes,
have, taken very
strong
important steps
steps. Mm,
or
mm.
strong steps. I think there is certainly there's an element of competition, and now it is no longer just regional. But if we go back a bit, we find that since or when Modi took over, since then he has reached out to the Chinese in order to keep. In fact, initially it was to improve trade, to try and build up a good relationship, etc. The Chinese didn't respond because that's not their style. They want everything for themselves. So even in trade, they will continue to impose a whole lot of disqualifications while they will want to get what they can. Now Modi is savvy enough to know that that's not going to work. So there was that, but Modi also began working to raise India's profile, and the Chinese were discomfited by that because they suddenly saw a rival on the horizon, someone who's trying to come up, and the US India relationship had actually started long before. It is not right now.
Yeah,
Um, and, from Vajpayee's time and all that. Now, Modi, of course, nurtured it. And he tried to build that up even more. We have certainly come closer. And with the deterioration in China US relations, that became a factor as far as the Chinese are concerned. And they began looking at Modi as someone who's leveraging, whatever he has to ensure India's rise, which any leader would do. And he began doing it. Secondly, he was not uh, inclined to negotiate with the Chinese in order to yield concessions. He was willing to negotiate, and even on the border, it is a question of talking to them, trying to get them to pull back, but not to yield ground. Which is why, for the first time, we had an army officer involved in the border negotiations. If you remember, the border commanders conference. So they have all that, and the Chinese didn't like it. And I was told by one Chinese that some years ago that every time Prime Minister Modi meets President Xi Jinping, he raises the border issue. The guy says Xi Jinping doesn't like it, he should raise it with our prime minister. So I said, but your prime minister is not at the same level. So, this kind of thing. They have this
yeah.
bug.
Ego.
They have an ego. And I think Modi is there. They know that he's there. He's very popular. And the Chinese keep saying about how many millions follow Xi Jinping, etc. Here, the whole world is a large number of people are following Modi. He's getting awards. World leaders are talking about him. That certainly rankles them because they didn't think India was anywhere near that level. So yes, there is an element of competition, and on that SEO summit, I think it was a cool move when we just decided we'll have it virtual. Whether Xi Jinping comes or not, it doesn't matter. But I must tell you that just a few months before that, I had met some Chinese. One of them asked me, uh, he said, "Do you think you'll be able to pull off the SEO in the G20 if Xi Jinping doesn't come?" So I said, it's your call because SEO was Xi Jinping's baby. If he doesn't want to come, that's fine. We'll have it. We'll hold it. And G20, a world leaders conclave. If he doesn't come, he's missing out on something. So I said, you have to decide it. We are going to go ahead. So he didn't like that response. He thought that we'd be a bit, I'd be a bit, shall I say, amenable to saying no, no, you must come, and Xi Jinping should come and all that. But my response was that it's your call. You decide. India is going to go ahead with it anyway, and well, let's see what happens. But that's the I think they don't like that kind of feeling that. And now with what's happened in Ladakh, April 2020, and thereafter, we have stood firm that no normalization till you pull back. Not that they're showing any signs of pulling back, but we haven't sort of tried to offer them any carrots so that they pull back either.
I'm itching to ask you a last question, sir. The status quo ante, is an interesting conundrum where if we are stuck, so is he. For us, I mean, our soldiers are pretty much used to it. His are not. Uh, a soldier would fight for his land that he believes is his land, sir. The Han has no connection here. How does he motivate his soldiers to literally get burnt, I mean, I've seen photographs of these poor Chinese soldiers with burnt faces, burnt hands, and the cold burns. How does he kind of do that? Because there's going to be a point of time where they're going to say, okay, no, we're not doing this anymore.
I think that point of time may take quite some time, but because it will be like a revolt. But uh, the couple of points I'll make here. One is that the PLA soldier who's deployed on the border has a 1 to 2 year term, and then he goes home, and he's itching to go home because he's going to make more money if he goes to Fujian or Jiangsu or wherever. That's one. Second, uh, often he's from a one-child family, so the parents want him back. Third, there is a reluctance, and we see that from the fact that there have been at least three pay rises over the last year and a half or two for troops deployed in Tibet. So that does indicate that incentives are being given. Third, they're building up a lot of infrastructure in Tibet, barracks, etc., in order to facilitate things. But the bottom line, as I think you alluded to, is that our troops are used to staying at high altitudes. I'm not saying it's a nice thing, but they have to, and they're used to it in large numbers. They're used to fighting in high altitudes with the Pakistanis or whatever. So for us, it's not a novel experience. What is new is the way that we built up, and now we are building up our logistics to match the force strength. But for the Chinese, being deployed in such numbers is a new experience. They had border outposts earlier, but now for so many, and but they are trying to build up the infrastructure. They are deploying a lot of oxygen points, etc., so that the troops are better looked after. They're doing all that, and the fact that troops are unhappy is also supported by the fact that the Chinese are now trying to recruit in Inner Mongolia and in Tibet,
Right.
trying, and those guys are not wanting to come, but they are trying to recruit troops. So I think they're going to have a tough time, which is why I started off by saying it's a miscalculation, strategic miscalculation by Xi Jinping, because this will add to his troubles.
As a joke, I put this across that the best leader for China at this moment for the rest of the world is Xi Jinping, because no matter what the world does, the more Xi Jinping is still heavier, and the amount of damage that he does to China is just so much more than the world can actually ever dream of imagining. So kudos to him and let him be there. He's the Imran Khan of Pakistan. Chalne do usko wahan par. So that was just a joke that I put out. Sir, thanks so much. This has been really an eye opener because one really wonders uh, as to what's happening when you get cryptic messages from China. Follow my command is a very cryptic message. Either he's like with a talwar and going into battle towards Taiwan or India, fair enough, follow my command. Great general, but he's sitting in a nice air conditioned, cushy office and saying, follow my command. It's quite a wondrous thing. So one really has to have an opinion of someone like you who's got a very, very keen eye on China to understand what's actually happening inside. Thank you
Absolutely.
for inspiring us, sir. There's a little bud which is growing inside me, which is the Chinese plant, which I'm kind of pouring a lot of water into and a lot of manure to learn about China, because I guess, as you said, the more the merrier, and the more people should join in and to understand and help India kind of deal with the biggest threat that we have on the north. So thank you so much for actually sharing your expertise. Looking forward for another very interesting interaction soon enough, sir. Jai Hind.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Jay.